out to be completely unreliable assholes.
Hello, Tim.
Hello, Ryan.
¿Cómo estás?
I'm alright.
Good. Because we are on episode 49. And we got things to talk about today.
Wow.
Are you amazed we have things to talk about? Are you amazed we're on episode 49?
I'm more amazed that we're on episode 49.
Got it. Episode 49 of what?
Dismembering horror.
That's correct. The podcast show where myself, Ryan McDuffie,
And myself, Tim Aslin.
we talk about what worked for us, what did not work for us, and anything we found interesting or noteworthy about a horror film. And we're on the hunt for the buried treasure, for the bricks of gold that we are greedily searching for.
Oh, I see what you did there.
Connecting it to today's film. Yeah. And, we like taking a subjectively critical standpoint.
I'm going to connect it how I feel to today's film, too. I feel like I want to just go back to sleep.
Oh, yeah? Right. Tim turned to me in this film and said, "Are you awake?"
Well, there was like the way we were sitting, I couldn't see you. There was like the couch was sort of between us. And it dawned on me, I was like, man, he hasn't moved at all this whole time. I wonder if he's even awake. Because I wanted to go to sleep during it.
Some sort of catatonic state, perhaps. I forgot I had a body to move in
my God.
in a not pleasant way. Yeah. Okay. We got, you know what? If you didn't get a idea, a sense of what we're getting at already, we weren't crazy about today's film, The Devil's Backbone, El Espinazo del Diablo. But Tim, where you're wanting to go back to sleep, perhaps, these sort of akin to the episodes that are on our films we loved, the ones that are we didn't enjoy, but I think, at least for me, like I'm gonna need some help figuring out exactly like what didn't work about it in the face of so many positive critical responses.
I know.
Like, were we just the odd man's out here? Were we just not in the right mood watching it with the lights on in daytime? Like, but we've done that with other movies too.
Like I have a list of specific things that I'm like, yeah, no, that's
okay.
This made me not like it.
Great.
So.
I think I was basically like, I need your help because I have some generalities. Mm-hmm. And anyway, as I said, I think it's fun to do this because I think it's equally fascinating to me when it's sort of on the surface. It feels like maybe a good movie in a way.
Right.
And anyways, yeah. I had a couple things from our previous 2 episodes.
Oh,
if we need some time filler for this one too, which we don't.
No,
we
probably
don't.
Not.
But just some things to go back 2 episodes to our episode on Audition.
I remember.
I was trying to make the case of how a lot of how it was shot was working in a way to sort of play off the men objectifying the woman, but simultaneously how the main woman and the women are the ones in power, kind of like in control of the men. And I was trying to think of shots, but like the main one that I just failed to mention, I wanted to mention retroactively, was during one of their date scenes. You have the woman, who's the crazed murderer or whatever, possibly. It's shot from her point of view, looking at our main dude. And like looking at the main dude kind of in this interview way, like in an almost reverse audition way. Like that was, I thought that was basically the shot that I think mainly supported.
Well, and if I remember right, which, who knows, the reverse shot of those date conversations, like, is not his point of view.
Exactly.
It's a lower off to the left of him, like low to high shot of her. So she's bigger and sort of higher in the
Yeah. Her
frame. So
frame is taking up the frame.
Yeah, that puts her in the sort of position of power.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's cool.
I thought that was cool. And then during last episode, Midsummer, you set up that you were going to say when it happened, you teased how there was a person who got up and left during the middle of it, but you didn't end up telling us which part that ended up happening.
Oh, it was right after the mallet to the dome.
And you said, what was his reaction?
He goes, "Fuck this movie," and got up and left.
So awesome, right?
I know. Yeah.
Great. Well, that's all. I was curious. Okay.
I mean, he missed a whole lot of other stuff.
Right. This movie. Okay, should we get into this movie then?
Yeah, let's just watch a trailer.
All right. Here's the trailer for The Devil's Backbone, a.k.a. El Espinazo del Diablo. For our international release films, I usually try to find the original language trailers, but sorry, I failed this time around or didn't take the effort.
How dare you?
But what we did get from this one was it Ghost Ship or Wrong Turn trailer? I think it was Ghost Ship, where it uses that cue that's like identical. You know?
It's just...
I called that out for that movie, which one that was.
Yeah, it's just hacky.
Yeah. It's just hacky.
It's kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
Mm.
I know. You know what, Tim? Like when I read what this movie was, I'm like, oh my god, Guillermo del Toro, like World War II era ghost film. I'm like, this is gonna be one of those.
It seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah. I'd been wanting to see kind of, fill out what I've seen of his films too. Well, I guess.
Do you think you've seen everything he's done, or most of what he's done?
I've seen most of them. Yeah. It's been a while since I've seen Blade 2. I don't think I've seen that since theaters. That was good, though. I remember.
It's pretty good. There's a
Mimic I haven't seen in forever, too, but that's one
that's
kind of,
that was a long time ago. Blade 2 has a really funny fight scene. It was like early CGI, and Blade is fighting, one of the... I think there's two bad guys. They're in like head-to-toe sort of black outfits, and it's like a hard cut to sort of the wide of this fight, and it's entirely CGI, like the Blade and the two that he's fighting, or maybe it's just one. And man, it is remarkable to see how far we've come with like just CGI people. You still see some of that sort of rubberiness and like the lack of gravity,
right?
But this is like, oh man, bad.
CG Wesley Snipes.
Yeah, it's just what the fuck is going on. But yeah, I agree that.
Well, speaking of disappointing CGI, we should get into this film.
Jesus Christ!
Oh, I'm sorry. I do want to preference this with like, I kind of do love Guillermo del Toro, though. I do. I really do.
I think this is a conversation we should have in Things of Note, because I have some thoughts.
Okay.
But so let's do
Senor del Toro.
What do we do first, right?
If you're listening, though, I do love you.
Yeah, you're lovely. You seem jovial.
I love everything he does. I love his museum thing. I mean, hey, man. But we have a job to do. I'm sorry. We're here to do it. Let's do it. Okay, right. Rating.
I would just stream it. I mean, I would borderline avoid it, but it's just people seem to like it, so go ahead.
Well, you're speaking to other people there. I'm just speaking to myself with these ratings, Tim. I think that's what I try to default to.
I know.
I kept wanting to say... So,
I would have sat through this.
my experience with the film was I guess my in summary review of it is like, I've said this about other films we've watched, but it felt like a movie that never started. So I kept feeling like there were a couple moments where I'm like, okay, here's when the movie's finally picking up, but then it was just a moment that I liked. And, but they weren't enough to save the movie for me. As cool as this, like a lot of the aspects were about it, I think my litmus test for would I stream it or avoid it is, would I rather be watching another film that I've seen 1,000 times?
Right.
And I would have. So I would tell myself to avoid it.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. That's what I said.
Hey, it is what it is.
That's my... Yeah. I just feel so bad.
Don't feel bad.
I like Guillermo del Toro so much, though.
Well, I mean, if it's any consolation, this was just his second bigger, or third, I guess, film.
But were we just not in the mood? There were so many good reviews. It was like I was.
They're wrong.
Okay. You know what? You're right.
Critically speaking, I mean,
it's our job.
Yeah, let's summarize.
Okay. All right. Can you start?
Sure. Spanish Civil War, 39, 38 maybe.
39, I believe.
There's a orphanage out in the middle of fucking nowhere. And, you know, it's a bastion for some remaining orphans and for some of the Republican left-leaning, what were they? The rebels of the coup that started the whole war.
Yeah. And are sort of...
They're in hiding there.
Are sort of dual protagonists, kind of, sort of, if you will. We have the open... cold open.
Don't even get me started on the protagonist.
So we have the cold open, which is Jaime is there for a fellow kid's death. What's the ghost kid's name?
Santi.
So Jaime is there for Santi's death, and then is still there. But then the kind of what feels like more the movie. Oh, and then a bomb is dropped that night too.
Right.
That doesn't go off.
It lands in the middle of the courtyard of this orphanage.
Yeah, and then we have, which is like, we're mentioning in the summary because it feels like it's such an important thing for the movie, but never
it is not
goes anywhere. And then we have Carlos. Is kind of feels like that's the movie kicking in of someone who's newly left there.
Yeah,
and they almost don't want to take him, but they do.
Right. Yeah. They don't have food and. I mean, they have room, but they don't. They're sort of scrounging at this point.
And then
for what purpose, right?
That's so Carlos sees this ghost boy, and there's a young man there,
caretaker,
the caretaker,
Joaquinto.
Yeah, Joaquinto, Jacinto,
whatever.
Who's kind of like
douchey McDouche McBag.
Right, he's mean and abusive to these kids in order so they stay in line, so nothing happens to them, so he doesn't get in trouble, which is what I gathered was his motivation.
He literally says that. He's like, "You guys can't step out of line, or else I get in trouble." Okay, what's the consequence of you getting in trouble? There's nobody else there. And
sort of over the course of 2 hours or whatever, Carlos just keeps seeing this ghost, and this guy Jacinto eventually
keeps being a dick. Yeah,
and that culminates somehow in like everything exploding, and it's just the kids versus Jacinto.
Well, he has an agenda. There's gold that the woman and doctor, who are sort of the heads of the orphanage, they are keeping that gold for the resistance.
Yeah.
That's why that gold is there and why they stay there, because they could just bounce out, but they are loyal to the resistance. And what did you call him? Joaquinto? No, Jacinto. Jesus.
I mean, that could be totally wrong too.
I don't know
That's
Spanish,
just how I read it.
So we find out his whole agenda basically is he's been he's just been deceiving everybody there so he can get the gold, so he can go away from the war, essentially.
And then we got these other adults just kind of keeping it down.
They're like workers. You mean the doctor and the...
Yeah.
Yeah, so the doctor and the... What would you call her? The woman who owns the orphanage.
Right. It's the administrator.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they have good intentions.
They've got their things going on, but it's like, whatever.
Yeah, it's very whatever.
It is very whatever. There's the fiance character who stands up to Jacinto, Conchita.
Right.
We got boys collecting slugs. We got... I don't know what happened in it.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing happens. There's no... Well... It's a slice of life.
Yeah. Great. Okay, great. So let's get into what worked.
All right.
What worked for you? What worked for you?
It worked like a charm, Smith.
What worked? What worked for you?
It was like kind of the other Spanish film that we watched, Los Ojos de
Angela's
Julia.
Eyes. Oh yeah, Julia's eyes, not Angela's eyes.
Los Ojos, yeah. Where
Angela's
you have
ashes.
this opening shot and line that seemed so promising. And then after that, it was all not the same. And that was my same experience with this one, where it's like, okay, you have this, it's like the Del Toro-y or Del Toran, like narrator posing the question of like kind of what a ghost is, and then tying that to the idea of a bomb being dropped in a really neat visual and not going off. So I liked that.
So here's what I think the attempt is to make the metaphor, the connection of like what haunts us. And there may be part of a sort of lost in translation in how this is, how we receive the language, right? Like a Spanish speaker may receive the language of like, I don't know Spanish, but like however they say what they say to us in English, like what makes a ghost, may kind of come across differently than we say it. Like in other words, instead of saying what makes a ghost, you could say what is haunting, like what haunts us.
I mean, it's like what we've talked about with the J horror movies, and it's the grudge.
Right. But I think that the overarching attempted theme is this idea of like the themes of repeating, so to speak, sins of things like greed and feeling trapped and like not taking action and not saying what you want and all these sort of like you're being held back, or like just the mistakes
Right.
of your own egotism or whatever. And that, as I looked into the Spanish Civil War a little bit to try and get some context, I mean, I kind of can see that there's maybe a connection if you were really into that stuff and you had context within your own life. Like Del Toro dedicated this film to his parents. Maybe that was a big part of their story as a family. Mm-hmm. So sure, those are all kind of good concepts, but I never felt like that they were landing in any clear way.
Well, they were. Oh God,
I know.
That's what didn't work. So
I know.
We'll save it for then.
It's hard to not. How do we talk about what worked if you?
Well, because
the bomb works.
I kept it isolated
as
to
a image.
that opening shot and line. That's all I said worked for me. Was
Okay,
the
fair enough.
introduction of all that.
I think visually, it's most of the time really pretty.
Oh yeah.
And I like that. I mean, any shot you're getting from like the doorways looking out onto the landscape are just awesome. The coloring of them is great.
I mean, a big part of that too, is I loved like the setting.
Yeah.
Like, what a neat sort of place to have a story play out. You got the basement was like so neat.
Yeah.
The kitchen area, the dormitory area, even their rooms, the adults, super neat. The central courtyard, like all the pieces are there, and I really enjoyed the setting.
Well, and I think that's what a lot of people are responding to in their praise of this movie. It's like you're almost getting hypnotized by that.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's good. Like, that's obviously working for them as well.
And I guess more generalities that could convince us of if it's a better movie. Honestly, like the performances and the actors, like just in the casting, except for the kind of bad dude, I thought they're all like, you could see
good.
them being in a better movie. Like,
Yeah.
They were there. They were like, much like the setting, like they were there ready to...
Yeah, I bought the kids for sure.
Like, yeah, just... It's weird. Like, if you took any just kind of moment in this movie and watched it, you'd go, oh, yeah, this looks like a good movie, you know?
Yep, definitely.
So, working in that sense. I guess now I just have sort of a few individual moments or aspects. Do you want me to list off those? Do you have anything? Okay. Well, I liked it was like one of the times I think where it actually kind of looked, maybe the first time it happened, where there's like the leftover ghost dust. That was just kind of a neat thing.
Okay.
Of like being introduced to that idea for the first time of like spectral matter being left over.
Yeah, it's almost ectoplasmic kind of vibey.
Having, I don't know, and that just, it was kind of just a good example of him, playing off the acting and the effect kind of working together, where he's like, oh, what is this? And kind of touching it.
Yeah.
The moment, a thing that I loved that I thought was the movie finally picking up was his little speech and presentation of the devil's backbone juice or alcohol or whatever that was. And you have these weird like fetuses with their spines showing.
I can explain what that is. I looked it up.
What was that?
So they've taken it a little further, I think, than the reality, just for the aesthetic of it. But it's spina bifida, which is essentially when your spinal column doesn't close in development, and so you have a gap in there, and then essentially your insides push out of the spine because there's a gap there. It's not holding it in. Right. So this can. Usually now it's seen early on in development and they do something about it in vitro, but in vitro? Whatever. Before the baby's born. But I think back in the day, you didn't know, and then the kid's born and it has this wound on its back, and then they try to surgically repair it or just not. And I think the result is this... here are examples of that.
I'm trying to remember more what it was in the context of the movie, though.
I really struggled to make that connection of what he was saying in that.
It was neat what he said starting off. That's I think why it hooked me, was kind of this visual, and then his idea that he started to present of like, where it's clearly like, it feels like it's a snake oil kind of thing he's doing by selling it to the townspeople, but he sort of ties it to, it's not dissimilar to believing ghosts or whatever.
Right. That's right.
It was, I thought it was silly and a little took it too far when he said, joined it to, it's like, well, so if you believed you saw a ghost, then go ahead and drink it. I was like, what? But again, that felt to me like it was something started to congeal in that moment.
Well, I guess sort of in a small way, I like that character development, that it sort of speaks to his character. He's like, I'm a man of science, and you got to do this, and you can see that his own facade is being chipped away kind of internally by himself, because the kid leaves, he drinks some of it, and then I think almost was it the next scene when he's reciting poetry to the administrator woman through the wall, and we realize that he's been carrying this torch for her, and it's like not coming to anything.
Yeah.
In fact, she's having sex with the young dude.
Right.
Right.
Murderer.
So there's this.
He's horrible.
There's this sort of the lie that we tell ourselves thing going on.
Yeah.
Which, if you can be cool.
Yeah.
It can. It's never developed, really.
The next thing, I mean, the very first time we saw the ghost, maybe the second time too, I thought that was neat.
Yeah.
And then it picked up what I was hoping for, I think, where I was hoping for, and maybe in retrospect, where I thought the movie should have gone like a quarter of the way through it, or like the inciting incident was leaving it so it was just the kids and this bad guy. Because it finally kind of at least got like a little, I wanted to see what happened next when it was, when everyone else died and it was just the kids versus this man.
Right. But that didn't happen till
That was the way end.
the very end. Yeah.
So at that point, I felt like if we said nothing happened in this movie, that felt like the only thing that happened to me.
Yeah, I can see that.
And then just kind of this as like, okay, well, this is the unique thing to this movie is it's like these 13-year-olds fighting a 20-year-old with sticks. Great. Cool. And make him get revenge by a ghost.
Right. I liked in the opening when, we see Santi dying and what was his buddy's name?
Oh, Jaime.
Jaime, yeah. So after that moment, we see that the body being dropped into the water and tied up, and the implication is, or the misdirect is, that Jaime has done that. But the imagery of that I like.
Yeah.
That it's weird well sort of pools of water underground are always just freaky.
Right.
I've
had those a couple times before.
I'm not sure I don't know anything about that stuff, so I don't know what...
Basement wells.
Basement wells are fucking creepy, yeah. Are they a real thing? They must be.
I mean, that looked like a real place
Yeah,
if it wasn't at least inspired by.
Yeah.
Okay, Tim, what did not work? You got anything else?
No.
All right. Oh, you know what? Kids collecting slugs.
That works for you? Great.
All right. What did not work?
It's not ready yet.
Seems to work okay.
No, something important's missing.
What did not work?
So, Tim, I want you to start, but
Okay.
because, as I said, I need help, but I want you to start in response to, we might have gotten this film off of, we get our films from lists.
Yeah, no,
so
this
this
is definitely off a list. I remember pulling it.
Bloody Disgusting Aughts Retrospect, Bloody Disgusting's Top 20 Films of the Decade, Part 1. Number 18, The Devil's Backbone. I'm going to read their short blurb.
Great.
And you come off of that.
Got it.
Following the Weinstein-butchered Mimic, his disastrous first foray into American filmmaking, Guillermo del Toro went back to his roots and crafted this elegant and deeply felt ghost story set during the Spanish Civil War. Like Pan's Labyrinth, which del Toro has called Backbone's spiritual sequel, it's alternately a gut-wrenching portrait of childhood in a time of war and a skin-crawling, evocative nightmare. It's also the rare horror film that functions equally well as a human drama, and that's due to del Toro's skill at writing full-blooded characters we can truly care about. At the end of the day, the film ultimately works so well because del Toro understands that at the core of every good horror story, whether explicit or not, lies a beating human heart.
Man.
Tim was shaking his head during most of that.
Oh my God. I have to dismember that as well. Jesus Christ.
Well, yeah.
Okay, so tell me what's the first line of that thing of when he's talking about the movie, like why it's so great.
crafted this elegant and deeply felt ghost story.
Okay, so elegant, I can actually kind of get behind in a certain way. Like we've talked about it. The look of it is it's of a time. It actually makes me think sort of like The English Patient. It's got this really beautiful sort of look to it, and it's shot in a way that is pleasing. The horror story just by itself. Let's just take that. The horror that exists in this movie is to me is one of the biggest flaws of this story. The main bad guy, his whole thing in the whole discovery of the movie, or the big aha moment of the movie, is the flashback of Jaime describing what happened to Santi. So Jaime has had this secret the whole time. And the secret is that Jacinto, or however you say his name, as big of a douche as he is, accidentally killed Santi. It's a fucking accident. So it doesn't make me care, or it doesn't make it more cathartic that he's a bad guy. We've already established he's just a dick.
I know, and
right?
something about, like, as you say,
So,
he's just a dick. He's not like a threatening, scare. Like, he is, but he's not. I was never at any point scared of him.
No.
And nor am I afraid of the ghost at any given moment, because it's a sort of like,
right.
oh, he was a boy who was harmed, and what has he done except sort of approach people?
So
like, that's not scary.
So the real only sin of that moment is that he, because he accidentally pushed the kid against the wall and it cracked his head open, which I guess it cracked it enough because the ghost has like broken forehead, like porcelain broken forehead,
Yeah.
which is a cool effect. I guess I left that out.
Yeah.
But the sin is that he, instead of telling anybody that there was an accident, that he wrapped him up and dunked him into the sink, and then that's officially killing him. He would have died anyway, but that's going to kill him, right? And
Right.
and then he leaves it be to preserve what? So it all sort of, to me, it all sort of falls apart right away from the development or lack of development of this bad guy character. Like, the information we've gotten is that he was an orphan there as well, right? He was there for 15 years. He left, and then he came back for some seemingly sort of like loyal reason, but then we find out the actual reason, which is he knows that they have gold there and he wants to steal it. So he's a dick. He also is a dick to the kids, kind of logically, right? Like, if he's trying to keep himself, close to the administrator so that he can get the key, so he can open the safe, so he can steal the gold.
Right.
He should be a little bit less of a dick and a little less sort of brazen about his behavior, right? Theoretically.
Yeah.
That's how I would want him to be, so that he can be what we might consider scarier. Like, the manipulator and the person, the snake, is much scarier than the lion, right? It just is. So he's just kind of like rah all the time.
Well, hearing you talk about it, combined like with what I was saying about about how it only picked up for me at the end when it was sort of boys versus him, was that, like, since the ghost stuff wasn't actually scary.
No.
Yet that was the bulk of everything, was just sort of milking nothing, like, and thinking that maybe it was that. This should have been a revenge story wrapped up in this sort of ghost, setting, right?
Right.
So
and
that's why.
how do you do that? Like, what do you want to see if that's the case?
Like,
do you want to see? You want to see the ghost in certain ways throughout that lead you along the path of discovery.
Well, I want to see is the boys and the ghost working together to defeat this guy, and that's what happens at the way end.
So I agree. Eventually, yeah, but how do we sort of, if you want to do this in a way that's weaving our way towards that, don't you want the kids and the ghost interactions to be, to be meaningful, or, to make them scary? I'm trying to think of a good example of something that does this, where the being scared of the ghost is the roadblock to understanding. And that never really exists, right? The ghost in this is completely non-actionable, right? Like, it just stands there.
Yeah.
It puts its hand on your shoulder and then disappears. Like, it doesn't
moans.
do anything. So we're not getting information every time we see the ghost.
size.
We're just seeing the ghost.
Yeah.
And it's just standing there, and we're, okay, great. And we're not even we're seeing it through my other big issue, which is who's the protagonist of this story? If it's Carlos, they fucked up because, he doesn't really do anything either. Mm-hmm. He, in fact, even in the end, doesn't do anything.
It felt like almost it was going somewhere with, I liked his character trait of he had a moral center of he never ratted out the other kids.
Sure.
He always took kind of the brunt, da-da-da.
Yeah. But he's completely passive.
Yeah.
He's sort of just following along with what people tell him, and then he sees the ghost, and then that happens 3 or 4 times, and then shit goes down
movie's over.
with the adults, and then the ghost shows up one more time, and he's less scared this time because he's seen it 5 times or whatever. And then the ghost is like, I have to tell you something. And he's like, oh, okay. And then we cut away, and then we cut back to Carlos saying, okay, so I know what to do because the ghost told me. That who gives a fuck? Like, let's get there through obstacles.
Yeah.
And then have the discovery be the discovery of Carlos. If he's the main character, have him figure it out. Don't have it told to him.
Right.
That's not how you fucking tell a good story.
Right.
Nobody gives a shit.
Right. If the whole question is what does this ghost want throughout?
Right.
It just, the movie tells us, the ghost tells us out loud itself once enough time has passed.
Right. And furthermore, the ghost doesn't even tell us what happened. Fucking, what's his name again? Jaime does.
Yeah.
He just offers it up. So this whole time, this other character who was first a bully and then kind of a buddy, he finally comes around and he goes, hey, by the way, yeah, I killed Santi. Or I didn't kill, I saw it, and here's what happened. If you're kind of splitting a protagonist in two by having these 2 kids having them do what they do in this movie. Because I think, in theory, the protagonist should be, well, maybe not. Yes. Okay. So Jaime is essentially a bridge between the ghost and Carlos. He shouldn't exist. He should be a representation of a bad part of the protagonist, Carlos, and just be a bully. Just have him be that thing. Have him be an obstacle.
It did feel weird as soon as I realized that was the same kid, like,
right
from the beginning. Like, why is the bully, like, rather than having it be that kind of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest formula of the outsider coming in and sort of getting these misfits helping them grow. It was like, okay, wait, but the Danny DeVito guy's a main character too? Like, what,
Right, not just a main character, but like holds the key to understanding everything, and it's like, well, not really.
Pseudo protagonist, I should say.
Yeah, so that's to me just a structural and character like formatting problem. So I think you would have been much better off if Carlos were seeing everything through his eyes. Mm-hmm. I mean, everything, and it's his struggle to deal with this place that he's been dropped into. So yes, have there be a bully. Yes, have him make some friends with the other kids, but also have his interactions with the ghost fuck with how he's interacting with the other kids. It makes him a pariah, or it turns him into, more problems at home.
Yeah.
And then have him also be the one who's seeing all of the weird interplay between the adults. Mm-hmm. If we see that stuff through Carlos's eyes, then suddenly we're spying, we're seeing in, and we're seeing how that might affect the outcome for Carlos. So that when he gets the information, or when he makes the discovery, if he's the one who sort of holds all of the information, but he can't tell anybody because he has no allies.
So maybe you're saying, like, if rather than having gotten that flashback at the beginning, if we're with Carlos and sort of only after gaining Jaime's trust by, like, going on these little missions for him like he does Jaime reveal this
I mean, I
thing?
think it's a flaw just to have Jaime in the mix there.
Yeah.
It doesn't work because
It could have
Why
been just
why doesn't
between
Jaime-
the bad guy and the ghost, and we just learn that altercation.
That's right. That's
Jaime
right.
didn't have to be there at all.
Jaime is sort of, like I said, he's sort of a split character. He's actually the ghost's voice. What the purpose he ultimately serves is to reveal the secret that the ghost is trying to get across. Mm-hmm. So he's bridging that gap, but he's also kind of Carlos, right? Like he's also the one who has a score to settle in the end. So it ends up being him who like kills Jacinto. Jacinto. You know what I mean? So that catharsis is through Jaime.
Yeah.
But we don't, like, Jaime's been kind of a douche this whole time too. It's like, even if we come around, sure, but we never got to care about Jaime enough. Seeing him there when Santi dies isn't enough.
Yeah.
Right? Like I didn't feel for Jaime. I was just
I guess
sort of
it was
like,
supposed
okay.
to play as like, okay, this bully character, he's three-dimensional because he's scarred by this, and this is how he's acting out.
I agree that I think that's exactly what the intention was. But I think they're splitting characters up in a way that doesn't help the movie or the story move along. Or to have the story be impactful upon these like revelations. It's just a kid being like, yeah, I just decided to keep this secret.
Right.
But why?
It was, yeah.
Like, we never get a sense. This is the other big problem. We never get a sense as to why anybody does what they do.
Yeah.
Right? Like, the only one, I guess, is the bad dude. Like, we get why he sleeps with the what do we call her? Carla.
Administrator.
We get that in the scene that it happens.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, why don't we see the intrigue of him leaving his girlfriend, like through Carlos's eyes? Let's see him leaving his girlfriend in the middle of the night, sneaking across the way. And you've already established maybe he's got these keys, you know, because he talks about the keys early on. And you're like, ooh, where's he going? And Carlos follows him, and Carlos sees him sneak into the old lady's room, and it's just, what the fuck's going on? And then we see the doctor, you know, he knows something's up, or Carlos and the doctor have a moment of like, shit, now we both know this. Something's up, but we don't know what it is, or we're ignoring what it is. You know, so you get this kind of intrigue of like, who knows what? I guess this would fall under sort of the broad umbrella of like why a show like Downton Abbey works, is because everybody knows everybody else's secret, but nobody's saying anything about it. There's really none of that. It's all just sort of right there. It's just handed to us, and then that's it. We've been given the thing. Nobody. There's no consequence.
You're right, because like it felt like, oh, here we go, a love triangle, but then as you said, no consequence.
Zero consequence, right? Like, I mean, poor Conchita. Like she fucking is she's just being treated like shit.
The younger woman is Conchita. Yeah.
And you know, and that's the other thing. This whole thing of between like Jaime giving her the ring, the cigar band as a ring, like having that interaction, it never pays off in any way.
Okay, maybe that's so that moment. I thought
it should be Carlos doing that.
Right.
All of this should just be one kid.
It was just interesting because all of these pieces, they felt like I could see them in a better Guillermo del Toro film. Like, they didn't seem different to me, sort of like, I loved Shape of Water and just sort of these details of like, okay, the bomb drop that doesn't go off, the giving the paper ring from a kid to another, like all this stuff, it felt like the same exact things, but they're just, I mean, you've probably already answered it, but they just weren't coalescing in any way.
Yeah. I don't think that the threads that are woven to connect those things work.
Yeah.
I think they're the wrong connections or non-connections. So they go nowhere.
Despite the characters having like the history that they have, and like, as I said, all the pieces were there, would you agree with I have down the characters just fell flat?
Yeah.
Somehow? Yeah.
Well, I think this is part of why, is because the characters no one really ever does anything or suffers any consequence. Or at the very least, we don't get a sense of that, right? The impending sort of overall hauntingness of the story is purely kind of aesthetic. It's kind of like it's a creepy place and they're like wandering around in the middle of the night and like sometimes stuff happens that's like mildly alarming, like a bang or, a pot gets tipped over. But none of that adds up to something that is satisfying or ultimately like revelatory to me at all. I mean, in
a movie sense, a character sense?
In a character sense, right? Like, I think the perfect example is Carlos being told by the ghost what to do.
Yeah.
That's not a moment. We haven't progressed toward a moment for that to mean anything. And then in its execution, it means even less because who gives a shit? He just told him how to, like, it's like in math class when you're in fucking, 9th, 10th grade or something like that. And yeah. And the teacher is like, okay, here's the theorem and here's the equation that you use. You plug this equation or whatever it is. Remember, you plug this formula into the equation and it proves the theorem.
Right.
And I always used to sit there going, okay, but why?
Yep.
What, like, I get it. That's how you answer the question on the test properly. You get the right answer. But why? Like, how did we get to that
right.
formula? Why does that formula exist?
To understand the why always.
Yeah.
And
I had a teacher literally say, don't worry about it. That's not the point. You just need to know the formula.
In order to get into a college.
Right. And I just was like, I'm out. And I just put my head down and slept through 3 years of math.
Yep. Me too. I did that too, Tim. And sorry, I just muttered like, I hate math. I want to say, I think the idea of what math is and represents is really, really cool. And I understand the why behind it now. It's just that my brain it's not for me. But I respect and love the mathematicians who get how it's this sort of inherently like part of the universe and is really fascinating if you can understand it.
Well, and I think to both our points, it's like you would find it fascinating if somebody was actually presenting it in a fascinating way that made you understand what the fuck was going on.
Doesn't mean I'd want to do math problems.
Right. It doesn't have to be your thing, but at least you'd appreciate it.
If there was a philosophy of math class, I wish they altered as an alternative to like a doing math class. I would have loved that.
Yeah, so just to me, it seems like the same kind of, I mean, that's a weird analogy, but you get where I'm going. It's the same problem of like, oh, well, this happens because this is where that goes, and you're just supposed to be like, it'll get us to the outcome. But like, why? And who gives a shit?
See if you have, I'm going to continue with their sort of the review I read, see if there's anything, I feel like you've already covered it, but if you can either re-summarize or say something new.
Okay.
So their next thing, it's alternately a gut-wrenching portrait of childhood in a time of war and a skin-crawling, evocative nightmare.
So I just disagree. I mean, I just fundamentally disagree. Go watch The Kid in the Striped Pajamas, or The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. You want to see, like, a movie about somebody, like a kid going through the awfulness of war? Like, let's see it. I didn't see any of that in this movie. What, because they get given a grain of whatever for lunch?
Yeah.
Like, that I'm not seeing these kids suffer in any way. Not even a little bit. None of them seem malnourished. We're told repeatedly that that's their experience. But I don't see Carlos suffering at all.
Yeah. How about, and a skin-crawling, evocative nightmare?
No. I mean, sorry. I don't know what part was skin crawling. I never once felt like, ooh, that's cool.
I think only the very first time we see the ghost, where it's before it's super obvious, and we've got to just, oh, there he is again.
Yeah, so I just blew this mic out. Sorry. I personally thought that the first time when the ghost is in the doorway is what you mean?
Yeah.
I thought that looked like a really bad comp.
There you go.
I was like, oh, there's a two-dimensional, like, they comped that kid in.
It was the CG later on after, like, the first time we see it, where I was just like, oh my God, I don't like it.
Yeah, so that, I think that's sort of the end complaint I would have is just like, whatever they were attempting to do with the CGI ghost didn't work. And I maybe that's why the ghost in the story is so limited, is because they're doing a thing that they couldn't have the ghost like run around or float around or do shit. They just had him stand and walk. Don't do it that way if it's so limiting.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I disagree with that part.
Del Toro's skill at writing full-blooded characters we can truly care about.
I can almost get behind that in so far as I think that the characters are fleshed out well.
Again, the pieces are there, yeah.
But they're fleshed out well by the writer. Right? Like, I believe that Del Toro... Did he write this as well? Yeah. So I believe that he knows deeply who each of these characters are. But I never...
feels for them, too.
Right.
You know?
I never felt like I got enough information or got to get in with them in the story. But I was like, oh, yeah, that guy... I can feel where this character is coming from. Can I get some more so I can... be there with him or her, you know, like, I mean, talk about underwrite, like Conchita, like she's kind of gets it almost the worst. Like, I want to see her dislike being with this guy, but feel trapped in that world. Yeah. And we never get, you know, this movie almost never gets us to just be alone with a character and see them feeling the way they feel. Well, then I don't care.
God, yeah, I know these Rotten Tomatoes, rich with psychological and political implications that never obscure its fundamental creepiness.
No, I mean, that's what it's trying to do.
Okay, yeah, I think we've already covered it. Was there anything else? I mean, it was just like, I wish the bomb dropped, I think, was the perfect example of like, this is a neat piece. This is sort of one of those little things that you put in. It felt like a middle ground between, it's either just one of those sort of flavoring, like on par or on point thematically, just sort of things woven in it, but it felt like a step past woven, where it was being really built up, like it was going to have some sort of payoff of either it goes off or it doesn't go off, and that is a moment, it not going off too, or something like that. Yeah. But it just, did it have any kind of resolution? I don't think so. No.
The sense I got from it, I have obviously don't know if this is true, but it felt to me like an anecdote that Del Toro had been told either by his family or somebody close to him or whatever, that he, you know, that the anecdote was, yeah, during that war when I was alive, one of their bombs dropped in the middle of our courtyard and didn't go off. It was crazy. And the idea of that is what he's putting into this film, but it's just an idea. Yeah. It's not tethered to anything. Yeah. It's just sort of like loosely there of like, wow, how fucking crazy a time to live where stuff like that happened.
It's neat in itself, like when he puts his ear to it, the sounds it makes.
Sure. But yeah, like if you're gonna broaden it into such a like piece, you know, it's this big visual piece in the middle of the thing, like I didn't feel like that was enough just to have the presence of it as a metaphor. Like, okay.
Right. We sort of like, from the get-go, it felt like, yeah, we get it. Like, you know, it was neat. You know, I said I liked that first line and when it was dropped, because I'm like, cool, here's the metaphor. You know, and
and like when it drops, so the other time, like when we see the quote unquote moment of it actually landing later in the film when Jaime is telling the story, it's just after Jaime has watched Santi get killed and he runs out into the rain and he looks up in the rain, he's got blood on his face and it's like washing the blood off his face, and then this bomb, he jumps out of the way of the bomb and it lands in front of him and doesn't go off. So cool, but what does that give us? Yeah. It gives us a visual, but does it give us anything kind of broader in that moment as like a,
Right.
an impact metaphor of
It felt
any
like
sort.
maybe if it was almost going to be like its potential was it sort of would have been a touchstone throughout of sort of as their sort of ideas of what the ghost is or whatever changes, then we sort of revisit the metaphor with a new perspective. But it just kind of felt like, oh, it's here, so I'm just going to sort of slow down to stare and awe at it again and touch it. But it wasn't.
Well, and look, in the moment of Jaime telling his secret, we and seeing this moment happen, this is the driving motivation of all of his actions is this experience he had. And we just cut back to the two of them sitting there going like, yep.
Got any comics to read?
Right. Instead, like, have Jaime have a point of view about it that's actually spoken.
Yeah.
Right? He could say something pretty, for his age, pretty fucking deep. And that's totally worthwhile. Like, kids often are able to pull out kind of really powerful statements in it almost inadvertently.
Yeah.
But like, have him say, yeah, that was the night the bomb fell. It almost fell on top of me. We all should have died that night.
Yeah.
But it didn't go off. And just the idea of that, of like, oh, right, we're all kind of on borrowed time.
Right. It's like none of them actually reacted to
what do we
it.
do about it? Mm-hmm. That could then have led us into, fuck this. We're going to, fuck this guy.
Right.
We're going to do something about it now.
I think that's a good...
But there's no actionable aspect of this movie. It's just people sort of being there, and then this happens, and then this happens,
right,
and then this happens.
I think another in summary way to put it, which is what I said about Evil Ed.
Oh God.
Which is that I think it could have been a really solid short film.
Sure.
Because you just have the background of this adult is inadvertently kills a kid, and then with the help of other kids, that ghost kid gets revenge. Mm-hmm. Like, and the setting is this really cool setting. Great. Like, you can do that in half an hour or less.
Sure. Yeah.
I would have really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
But as you said, I mean, maybe that's just where my mind goes, because you said nothing happens, so you just condense it. Just take out when stuff isn't happening.
Yeah. I thought the explosion, that CGI explosion, was pretty shit.
Oh, when they like fly forward?
Yeah.
Whoa!
Oh, man.
I remember you reacted to that. You said what I was feeling. It's kind of like, whoa, like, okay.
Yeah. Ooh. That's... I think maybe what people are responding to is the bleakness of it, that it is pared down into this sort of just like, shit, like this is just the way it was, or but I didn't really feel like, if that were the case, like let's go bleak. Like, go bleak. Like, let's see the kids starving for real.
Yeah.
Like, let's see that shit.
Yeah.
If you're going to do it, if you're going to say we're paring this down to just, this is humanity at its sort of a really bad point.
It did feel weirdly tame for feeling like it.
There's no...
So deceivingly bleak, as you put it.
Yeah. There was... I never thought, like, unless the bomb is supposed to do this for us, like, I never felt this impending doom.
Yeah.
Like, even when the doctor goes into town and those dudes get killed, then suddenly he's like, oh, we got to get out of here.
Right.
What?
It's interesting. So I think maybe this is another, in summary, way to put it, but more specifically how to distinguish his other work from this was they sort of all have this, like, from a child's point of view, almost... storybook quality, but then are given this gravitas with sort of violence, seriousness, the repercussions that maybe weren't there for this one, but that they just weren't here in this one. Like when you had the altercation between the main bad guy and the fiance, and she stood up to him, it was like I felt like I should have been feeling so much more. in that moment, like make him truly evil. He is, but I didn't feel it,
Yeah, we never felt it because it comes kind of late. He's a dick and then he's a murderer.
Right.
And it's like, no, we should have seen him. I mean, Carlos or Jaime should have seen him fucking kill somebody earlier on.
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it in forever, but Pan's Labyrinth, like the main colonel or whatever he is, main evil Nazi, remember doing pretty despicable things. And then Michael Shannon in Shape of Water was like, oh, he's bad. You really are afraid of him.
But
he's messed up.
To your point of like seeing it through a child's eyes, like I didn't think we got enough of that, and I would have thought that bad guy was worse of a person if Carlos had seen him sneaking in and out of the school marm, like her room, the one-legged lady's room, and you go, ooh, what a fucking, like, what's he up to? Or seen him, having an interaction with one of the workers from town where he actually threatens the guy, and then realizes that the kids are maybe close and watching, and he has to kind of cover that part of his personality up, but he's never covering it up.
When I say through a child's eyes, I think I more mean Guillermo del Toro is able to tap into that sort of childlike wonder at the world, and a method that he uses to do that is then seeing things through a child's eyes.
Yeah. But like the impact of how the children feel about any of this was, it's disconnected and almost sloppily placed, because the one time you see Carlos really emotional is, I can't remember what comes just before this. I think it's a big interaction with, oh shit, I don't remember. But it's when the doctor has died. Something else has just happened. And then we hard cut to Carlos upstairs where the doctor was sitting waiting to shoot, with the record player, all that upstairs room. And it's a hard cut to Carlos like weeping over the fact that the doctor is now dead. And it's like, whoa, how did we get there? Mm-hmm. It's disjointed in its execution of our sort of watching these characters move through the story.
Yeah.
And then we're right out of it because then the bad guy has grabbed the gun and is like, come on, kids, I'm gonna lock you up. We're gonna undig the safe, and then I'm gonna lock you in a closet.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's to be honest, I feel this way about a lot of Del Toro's films. I feel that he's not great at smoothly depicting a story, like from point to point. Mm-hmm. I always feel disjointed in his movies.
Is this what you wanted to get to in things of note?
Yeah.
Do you have anything? I feel like we're kind of repeating things anyway.
I don't really. I don't have anything else.
Great. Okay. Things of note.
Things of note!
This should be interesting.
So in looking at that, I kind of, he's got such a mystique about him. People really love him, and they really hold his movies up. But
I loved Shape of Water. Like, I really felt like this coalesced into something.
I think Shape of Water has a lot of really great stuff going on, but I think it actually does suffer from the same thing of disjointedness. It's not so much disjointedness in that movie, but it's like we're jumping in, the characters are jumping in their progression. So for example, in Shape of Water, the first time she sees whatever, the fish guy, she almost without even hesitation is like, ooh, this is interesting, let me leave an egg, right? The next time, I think, in that movie, we see them together, they're already pals. Like, we've jumped in the progression of that. We don't get to see her kind of question whether or not this is a good thing. So that jump happens, and then I think later in the movie, there's another jump.
Okay, I think...
So it's stuff like that where I'm like, the massaging of how we get from point A to B to C in his movies often, to me, feels either rushed or glazed over.
For me, this was, I think, Shape of Water. That didn't bother me because it worked in as example of sort of how you tell this story that's been told before. Like, I'm not interested in those in-betweens at this point.
Sure.
Like, it's all familiar enough to me that I'm like, get us to what's unique in this movie.
That's fair. Yeah, I think that, to me, at this one, like, because I agree, it's a really good movie, but I just want more character. The other moment that felt rushed like that in Shape of Water that sticks out is when her neighbor, the artist, his turn from being like, I'm never speaking to you again, to back in is like fucking instantaneous. You know what I mean? Right. I never feel like, oh, we've got something to lose.
I think in that moment, I felt like she gives some impassioned speech, and it was like, it was on the level of, ooh, wow, I feel told this woman is in charge, and I just was affected by her. So I bought it wholehearted. Like, I loved that moment. It really played for me.
I think it is largely a taste thing where I really want to see characters take a moment to contemplate.
Well, here's what's the distinction. I know the outside distinction between the two for me, but I don't know. Maybe it's, you already answered it therein, but it felt like Shape of Water, like within those first 30 minutes or whatever, I felt like I had already sort of lived this whole life with like her and her neighbor. Like, I'd already sort of fallen in love and got to know with them. Yet that was just not there at all for Devil's Backbone. Right. But as I said, like, but yet it was the same on the surface, all these pieces.
Yeah. I mean, I will say I've seen all of his movies except for
Kronos.
I think I've watched Kronos, but I can't remember.
I remember liking it, but sort of more in just the sort of like what his strengths are is just sort of a storybook story come to life, just kind of a good demonstration of that.
Yeah, I mean, just as I look at it, Hellboy, Pan's Labyrinth, Hellboy 2, Pacific Rim is
I did not like good. Pacific Rim. I remember I saw that I was so excited for it. I love my kaiju, but I saw it on my birthday, whatever birthday it was, came out, and I was just like, they were just CG and it wasn't exciting, and I don't know, man.
It suffers that same sort of, I never really feel like I am in emotionally with the individual characters. I think that's where my big wall between liking his movies and not is. So
if you want to amend thinking that about Pacific Rim, you should watch what my recommendation was of my last Godzilla movie I recommended, Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Habitat.
Okay.
Just an excuse to say that title again.
That's sort of it.
Noteworthy for me, though, was just sort of like, we are familiar with Del Toro enough, even like, after seeing a couple of his movies, that I think you can identify what feels, what did I put? Del Toran, or
right.
I don't know how you'd say it. But it was so I had a list of those for me.
Oh, cool.
And it was like, whether tell me if you feel that you can substantiate it, because it's like whether they're literally reoccurring in his other films or not, they feel like him. So I had the 1939 wartime setting.
Yes.
Boys collecting slugs and comic books.
Sure.
Smooth-faced, handsome bad guy.
Uh-huh.
Older, bearded, grandfatherly good guy.
Sure.
Prosthetic leg.
Yeah, I would throw that into the biomechanical sort of like almost steampunky aesthetic that it's in every single one. Yeah, exactly. For sure.
Dust.
Sure.
Okay. And then Ghost with a still present head injury.
Oh, where else is
just something about a ghost and then some. Oh, you know what I haven't seen of his was the Haunted House movie.
I tried watching it and I was like, this is talk about nothing happening.
I felt like for that one it was I still want to see it because I was told, oh well, it's not it's not scary, but that's not what the point. I still
It's a
want to see it.
gothic love story is basically what it should have been classified as.
Which is what it was classified as to me.
Oh, good. So somebody told you the right thing.
Yeah. That's all I had.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, everybody was a little too clean and pretty for a war movie for me.
Despite the dust.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was reading through actually on the Criterion Collection's website, an essay called The Devil's Backbone, The Past is Never Dead by Mark Kermode.
Oh, Mark. You've done it.
I just wanted to read a couple excerpts.
Sure.
That is sort of, are some background, whether we liked it or not, an interesting background to see how it was formed. So Del Toro began work on The Devil's Backbone in the wake of two terrible events that he would describe jointly as the worst experience of my life. The unraveling of his Hollywood debut, the mutant bug movie Mimic, which Miramax had signed on to direct, blah, 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 and the kidnapping of his father, who was abducted in Guadalajara and held for ransom for 72 days. Like, Jesus Christ, right, Tim? He said this film was dedicated to his parents.
Let's see that movie.
Oh, God. Well, surprisingly, Del Toro describes this falling out with his Mimic producers as almost more traumatic because what was happening to me in the movie was far more illogical than the kidnapping, which is brutal, but at least there are rules. I remember there was a moment on Mimic that was an almost out-of-body experience when I achieved an absolute Taoist sense of being there, but being almost in a state of grace and being able to survive that fucking pain. I'm trying to think. It's Del Toro saying this.
Yeah.
And these strange mixture of becoming... Sorry, I won't do it. Becoming immune of not engaging and believing you are not important at all. That the only important thing is the film. I slipped into it at the end.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to think. I think I think this is true for a lot of... It's a different sensibility than your kind of quote-unquote U.S. Western, film storytelling aesthetic.
Right.
Like, I think there's a European films, they got a different kind of vibe going on. And things that play for them, we're not used to. And sometimes I think we just go, oh, that feels weird because it would have been done differently if that movie were made here by somebody from here with a different set of, contextual sort of whatever, like their upbringing or their exposure to film is a different thing. So, yeah.
Something we've talked about, I think, is a distinction, like with, ghost movies, so the obvious easy one, but a lot of horror movies that feature anything supernatural. We've talked about kind of the distinction between like the Insidious movies, let's say, and maybe actually sort of what generally Del Toro's strength is. When I said a sort of openness and wonder, is I think there's an inherent distinction between the films when the filmmaker is like either maybe has had a paranormal experience or is at least sort of like a skeptical toward the idea that we know everything we know already and all that's ridiculous. They're open-minded. Doesn't mean they have to believe in ghosts like we've talked about before, but they're open-minded to like what that even means or blah, blah, blah. So it's interesting that didn't come through necessarily for this one. But the anecdote that I wanted to read is that there was an aspect of this that did come from a real life ghostly experience he had. Remember how they refer to the kid as the one who sighs or whatever? So from the same essay, as a child, Del Toro said he made a pact with the monsters in his bedroom, overcoming his night terrors by befriending the apparitions that haunted his waking dreams. So when, at the age of 11, he heard the sound of his deceased uncle sighing in the room where he had once lived, rather than being terrified by the experience, he stored the memory away, keeping it, nurturing it until one day it could be used to creative ends. So, hearing his ghost uncle.
Interesting.
The one who sighs.
Huh. Okay. I mean, I think that's cool.
Yeah,
but
that's what I think. Note.
Yeah, I think that in this particular execution of all of these influences and cool ideas, is a lack of connective thread and character sort of pathway.
Yep.
So there was one thing I forgot to mention in things that didn't work. The keyhole scare.
Oh God, that was just that we saw in the end of the trailer.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonky.
Yeah.
But it was initially I thought, oh, that's cool because they basically it looked like they built a big keyhole, maybe a foot tall one, and put it in front of the camera because everything was really in focus and it looked cool. I was like, oh, that's a good way to do that.
Yeah.
And then they blew it up with a bad CGI eyeball. Well, what do you think?
I think we should move on to RecommenDEADtions.
Fuck.
What?
I can't think of one.
Well, I'm just gonna, now that I'm, it was nice having these Godzilla movies to mention because I was able to store up, I've seen some things in the meantime. I was able to sort of.
Yeah.
I'll give a shout out to currently in theaters, probably still in theaters by the time this comes out. I loved Toy Story 4 much, Tim.
Nice.
It's probably my favorite out of them.
Wow.
Like if each of this Toy Story films or maybe the 3 sequels have been kind of about a different era of like growing up, let's say, this one I think is very much about like if Toy Story 3 was about moving from like into, I don't know, there's stages of adulthood, right? I don't know. I felt like Toy Story 3 was about saying goodbye to childhood, and Toy Story 4 is about saying hello to adulthood. Those sound like on the surface the same thing.
That's cool.
But Toy Story 4 got me and reminded me it wasn't. And like I went into it so skeptical of like, come on, how are they going to do it again? Like the third one was the perfect ending. Da da da.
Yeah.
Then after the first scene, I was just like, oh, that's how they're going to get me again. And I loved it. It was very that great Tom Hanks performance, very Woody centric. Mm-hmm. And it was great. Go see it, man.
That's cool. I will.
Great.
Not in the theater though, probably.
Okay. Fair.
So I guess I keep starting movies like horror films either on Shudder or whatever to be like, ooh, this will be my next recommendation, and they keep sucking. Like I even put on last night Friday the 13th Part 2, and I was like, yeah, Part 2. Ugh, it's horrible.
You have to be, I mean, I acknowledge those movies are horrible, of course, but like
I turned it off. I was just like, this isn't giving me what I need.
Once you know what they are, you can, the mood may strike or not.
Yeah.
But
I also started watching Mandy again.
Oh, yeah.
So good.
Well,
I was like, I have about 35 minutes. I'm going to watch the first,
You just got to watch it all.
I know. Well, I will. But since I mentioned it before, you want to watch a fucking bleak ass movie that's really good and has amazing kid performances, watch The Boy in the Striped Pajamas.
I haven't seen it.
Unpleasant. It's
Okay.
really sad. No, it's not unpleasant. It's just really sad.
Right.
But like, oof, it'll get you.
Which reminds me, Tim, I haven't done it for a while, part of the show. Have you seen I Saw the Devil yet?
No, I should have watched that. Fuck. Instead of Friday the 13th too.
Maybe next time I ask.
Maybe.
Okay, well, next episode is a special episode, and we don't have anything planned. It's episode 50, Tim.
I know. Should we? Let's just wait till number 100.
I think we just have to trust the hat is going to give us something special.
It's your turn to pull.
I know.
You want me to hold it?
No.
Okay.
I'm just getting it down. All right, so what is going to be our very special episode 50? There's a couple I have in mind that would crack me up. But let's see if it's one of those.
Is it a classic?
Not one we haven't seen, but it's another Japanese one, so I'm excited. One Cut of the Dead from 2017.
No idea what that is.
I believe it's maybe a zombie film.
Let me see that.
It's just like I said.
Huh. Yeah. Maybe. Do you think you put that in there?
Oh, of course I did.
Cool.
But hopefully for good reason. And maybe, I guess we won't know till after the fact what will make episode 50 so special. So,
oh yeah,
excited to find out.
We'll do it live.
What?
Yeah, we'll just do it live. We'll do a live podcast.
Yo, you mean instead of writing our script ahead of time?
That's right. Yeah.
Like, this is all a script we've been
Can
reading
you tell?
from.
God, we're such good writers.
Great. Well, in the meantime, you can find us at dismemberinghorror.com.
Oh, yeah, and also dismemberinghorror at Gmail and on Instagram. And Twitter is dishorrorpod.
Please tell us a movie you want us to watch. If you've agreed or disagreed with us and want us to let us know what you think. Especially if you don't agree with us and have a rebuttal to anything we ever say, we'd love to read that at the head of our episodes.
I wouldn't mind if people start doing that, doing like extra like little side episode, like tiny versions of an episode just to address those things would be fun, like a 20-minute or something like that. Just be like, this person said this about this or whatever.
One. Well, as the show gets older and older and we have more and more old episodes to refer to. You know?
Yeah.
Great. Well, that we said where we could find us: Instagram at Dismembering Horror, Twitter at DisHorrorPod. We do Instagram stuff.
Yeah.
We made a fun little video for our Poltergeist 2 thing. You should watch that on our Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's summer, man.
More to come.
Yes. In closing, thanks for listening.
And we'll see you next time.
Goodbye.